Well, it's normal on Friday to see that smiling face. That's Keith Riggs, the head football coach of the Jenks Trojans. Now, 8 days after a nice win over a Deer Creek team that we talked about last week. We won't revisit that one, but I do want to revisit some of the guys who got a little dinged up in that one. Because I know you had Malachi Jones and Malachi Dillard, pardon me, and Owen Jones both have some minor injuries or at least injuries. How are they doing this week?
Yeah, good. Owen probably could have gone back in. It was pretty early in the game, but just as a precaution, we kept him out. Malachi later in the game, and he's still, in kind of in recovery mode. Ankle sprains are tough on skill players. Just all the cuts and stops and starts they have to make. But both of them are progressing.
Good. Nowadays too, and we hear so much about in the old days, in my days, your days even, it was, hey, just an ankle. Now it's a high ankle or a low ankle or a side ankle or this ankle or that ankle. But the technology to improve them has come along. Are those injuries really different? And how much faster are you seeing recovery than maybe you did 10 years ago?
Well, you're absolutely right. With the technology and the advances that have been made, kids are getting, recovering and getting back from injuries so much faster now than they used to. Um, just the full understanding, the facilities and resources that are available. We have an outstanding athletic training staff here and a great facility for rehabilitation of injuries. And so they do quite often recover much quicker than they used to in the past.
There's no doubt about that one. All right, so we've got a team coming up more that started the year like a house on fire. They have lost three in a row. Doesn't mean they're not a good football team. They are. What do you see when you look at them?
Well, offensively, very explosive on offense. They've got a dual threat quarterback, Malachi Miller, that throws a really good deep ball. Great runner. They gain an extra blocker with their running back in their run quarterback run game, and that can really stretch your defense. They have some really fast receivers, so it's tough just to play man to man on them and load the box. Um, Defensively, they're very aggressive on defense. They're going to try to get you in bad situations, get you in long yardage situations on early downs, and then try to force you into mistakes.
Part of the problem for them, obviously, early on, they played some teams over there that they were just downright better at. Have they had other issues? Are they having injuries or anything else like that? Or they just hit a streak of tougher teams?
They've played some tougher teams and they've had some tough breaks. A play here, play there. They had in one game, one close game, they lost a couple of deep balls that were dropped that would have been touchdowns that probably changed the outcome of the game. So for the most part, they've been in all the games they've played in. Um, and like I said, when you're explosive on offense like they are, they can stay in any game they're in.
Right before we started the recording, you and I were talking about having the extra day because you looked a little more refreshed. You said it really helped the kids too this week in practice, huh?
It did, just you can't undervalue rest, the value of rest, and having that extra day on the weekend, I think really helped our kids.
It got a little bit warmer, but it's not as humid, so it isn't so bad to practice in this, is it?
It really hasn't been too bad. The wind has been blowing pretty good as well, which kind of helps. And the humidity is down. So I think everybody's ready for that nice, cool fall weather, but not too bad this week.
I would think so. All right. So we've talked before about making trips across the state. You made the trip to Enid and places like that and before. And more to me is one of those places that it seems like you can never get there. I always feel like I'm almost in Denton, Texas by the time, in that area before I find my way to no more. Although I do think, by the way, that Kickapoo Turnpike has really helped. How do you guys
Yeah.
take that trip?
We take the Kickapoo now, and I think it makes a huge difference. It's not so much that it saves you a lot of time, but you avoid some key areas that get backlogged quickly on
Yeah.
I-35 and it just feels like even when you don't have a backup, it just feels longer going all the way to I-35, I think, and then down south. So the Kickatoo Turnpike has really helped that
It,
trip.
It has at this time of year, you're trying to prep for the playoffs, and your guys, like I've always said, have always been really good about that. And you don't want them to take anyone lightly, which I don't necessarily think you have to worry about that. But they do know Moore's lost three in a row. How have you addressed it during the week to keep them on point?
Well, you just have to watch film of Moore. I mean, you can show them some great football on film of the Moore team. That's one way to get their attention. But then the other thing is just thinking big picture. It's not all about this week. We need to take another step forward this week, but our goals are out there ahead of us, and we need to be working towards those every day we step on the field for practice.
Is there a part of this team that from game one to now has really improved itself, has upped its game? Is it an offensive line, a defensive line, a player, or has it just been consistent improvement across the board?
Well, generally just consistent across the board, I think. But, our O line play has improved tremendously from the beginning of the season to now, I think. Uh, our Owen and our receivers are getting more comfortable with each other. We didn't bring back much productivity from receivers. We graduated, a lot of our catches from last year. So there's certainly been some improvement there. Um, Being able to move Jack Wiltshire over to defense this year has helped tremendously. So the defensive line has played really solid all year, but he's played on offense primarily for 2 years now. So he continues to get better and better as he gets more comfortable in that defensive role.
How does he like it? And I ask that because, we all have a position or a place we'd really like to play, and everybody wants to say, Coach, I'll do whatever you want. And I've said it before, I'm sure you have too. But what does he really prefer?
Yeah, he is one of those guys that will do whatever we ask because we kind of had him slotted in as a sophomore to get some playing time on defense. So, but I think without asking him directly, I think he's a defensive guy at heart. So I think he's enjoyed being able to play some defense this year.
For each position, there's something that kind of attracts you to whatever that is. I mean, we talked before about, how offensive linemen are a group. They seem to be a family. What is it you think that attracts somebody like that to an offensive line? As a guy who played the offensive line myself, I always loved the position. And I know people look at it like, well, yeah, I mean, it's an important, but I want to see the running backs and the receivers and all those kinds of things. What is it about a certain position you think that really gets a guy going?
Well, offensive line is a great example, right? They get the only time their name or number is called is when they mess up, right? When they have a
Right.
penalty. And so no stats. Um, so I think the fact that it just natural that group kind of comes together as a group and identify really more as a group than as individuals because of that. It just is kind of a natural progression. And it's always kind of fun to see that develop as the season goes on.
Right. And that's one of the reasons that is a group that no matter what level football you play, sometimes to me seems to have the greater steps as they play together, unless you bring everybody back, which is really rare and a godsend for anybody who has got a football team, right? I don't care who you are. If you're from Pee Wee to the NFL, if you can bring five guys back who have played together, you're blessed.
Absolutely. Uh, you know, Football is an ultimate team sport. Everybody's got to do their job, but even more so on the offensive line, all five of those guys have got to be coordinated and working together, communicating together, you know, getting your double teams, working off the double team to the second level. There's just so much coordination that goes into those five guys that makes it so important they work well together.
You told me multiple times this year your biggest key was you just wanted to see your team gain consistency. Do you believe they're doing that?
I think so. I think we've gotten more consistent in a lot of areas, and that has shown ultimately on the scoreboard, over time, and hopefully, we've still got room to grow, and we want to keep moving that direction and be playing our best football here in a few weeks.
Anytime you do an interview or talk to anybody, there's some things you say like we want to play best at the end of the year or the offensive line's a family. All of us have these football isms, I guess. Is there one of those as a coach that you avoid, or are there any of those as a coach that you completely avoid? Like I was around a guy who he every week he said we just got to do our 111th, and eventually his players like, oh, for the love of God, stop doing that. Is there anything that you avoid because it's a footballism?
Um, Not really. I certainly try to not overuse any of my favorite phrases because you can, not intentionally, but the kids can kind of tune you out when they hear the same exact thing over and over and over. So even when you're really saying the same thing, you kind of look for different ways to
Yeah.
say it. So it maybe is taken a little differently, it resonates differently, and they keep hearing the message.
Yeah, because you don't want it to be a crutch. Yeah, there's no question about that. All right, I have to ask you this because I wanted to drop in a mention here. One of our sponsors for Corey Sports Special is a place that you and I had an hour together, and that is Sunrise Cafe,
Oh,
at
yes.
101st and Sheridan, which is fantastic. What is your favorite breakfast meal?
Ooh, well, first, breakfast is my favorite meal. I could eat breakfast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Uh, I love pancakes and waffles. I think maybe I love the syrup more than the pancakes and waffles. Maybe that's why I like them so much. Uh, but eggs, bacon, sausage, and omelets. It would
Yep.
be hard to pick one favorite. But boy, breakfast, yeah, that really hits home with me.
All right. So the reason I mentioned is Randy had sent me a note over at Sunrise. Here's his special this weekend. Strawberry stuffed French toast with two eggs and then any breakfast
Ooh.
meat you choose. So it's strawberry cream cheese. They put it between two pieces of sourdough. They dip that in French toast batter they make. Then they grill it until it's, nice and crispy and gold. Then they put fresh strawberries and cinnamon powdered sugar on top. What do you think?
Ooh, right. It's right up my alley, I think. Yes, that sounds wonderful.
You know what? You get yourself a nice win. You have something you can go celebrate with right over there. Keith, it's always a pleasure, and there's no question. Thank you very much for joining us on these Fridays, and we'll do it in at least a couple, three more times, hopefully several.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Sounds good.